All right. Hi, everybody. I think we'll give everyone just a couple of more minutes because this is a pretty slim crowd here. So I think we'll wait just another minute or two and let everybody, whatever, populate or that's not the same thing as populating. What is the right word when it's waiting for the people to pop up on the screen? Maybe populating is a good word.
Makes sense to me.
While we're waiting, how is everyone doing? I see all familiar faces so far, no strangers out there, so. I hope most of you are planning to go to the Nickel Conference. Anybody going to the Nickel Conference? Will I see you there?
I wanted to go, but I'll be sending a couple of my staff members though.
Well, that's good, Harvey, but I'm sorry I won't get to see you there.
Yeah, I had initially planned on going, but we're doing this ADA event on the 26th. So it kind of made things a little difficult for me to attend those 4 days.
Yeah, you're not the only one. We always do the Nickel Conference during the ADA celebration,
Yeah,
and some centers have ADA celebrations, and so
exactly.
there is a potential conflict there for sure. So sorry that we'll miss you. Good that you will see you, Denise. That's good. And Muriel, you going to be there? Do you know? No.
Actually, I can't. 3 of my stuff are gone. My daughter's getting married in Amalfi, so we're
Well,
going
probably
to
the
wedding.
wedding takes priority. Okay.
But I'm sure the staff is going to represent well, and they're going to bring back all the information that's needed for us to grow. So I'll miss everyone. It was an amazing conference last year, so I was really happy.
Yeah,
to be
as
part
we've
of it.
recovered from COVID, I thought last year really went well, and I'm assuming that this year will be better yet. So, we've
Yeah, but hopefully I won't miss it next year. God
hopefully
willing.
not. Yeah, just one wedding, right? That's that's good enough. So, well, we're going to talk today about. I pull up my screen share, but we're going to talk today about boards. And we've been talking a little bit about boards in other settings too. And while we're kind of waiting for everybody to get here, Bethany's puppy. Yeah, my puppy's the other thing, Bethany, that he's all healed, but that's the other thing that's been going on since we talked last.
Oh,
He's all healed up, but he had 2 surgeries, and so he was kind of a mess too. I know. But anyway, we've been talking a lot about boards because when we see centers in trouble, it's often because the board is not paying attention. And for one reason or another, the executive director is not able to keep up alone and needs more support from the board. And we've seen some pretty scary situations that have happened that were really preventable if the board had just been doing basics, like checking in on a regular report of what was going on, or reviewing the financial reports appropriately. Just if they had been doing just basics, they would have seen the trends and the problems that were beginning to emerge in a couple of centers that I work with that almost closed. I mean, one of them I'm still not sure will survive. I hope and pray that they will, but they still are right on the verge and really struggling. And it was because the board wasn't paying attention, and for whatever reason, the executive director was no longer able to do it. Now, in a couple of situations, which I'm sure is not true of any of you, the executive directors were keeping the information from the board. Never a good situation. If you find yourself tempted to do that, please call me and let's have a long conversation about how to approach the situation. In one case I know of, the executive director was way in over her head and didn't ask anybody for help, and it just got worse and worse, and she didn't know how to ask for help, and she was afraid she'd lose her job, and she ended up losing her job because she didn't ask for help soon enough, right? But we're finding more and more that boards need to be involved in some way, and you're the best person to get them what they need. As the executive director, for one thing, you're the person in touch with the board, right? Your finance manager may also be in touch with like their, the board's finance chair or committee. And the finance person might give the financial reports at the board meetings or whatever, and all that's fine. In fact, I think it's healthy if it's not just the executive director that the board, is connected with. But as we look at this situation of boards and the board's need to be responsible, we find that you're the best entity to put the board there, right? To get them there. So we certainly want to look at how that can happen. How can we help make sure, how can you help make sure that your board is well prepared? And let's say you win the lottery and you go on a 6-month vacation and you leave the center in someone else's hands and the board isn't paying attention and the new person doesn't do what they should, and it all begins to fall apart. How can your board be prepared to handle that? Right? Or any other scenario where for whatever reason, you're not right there. So you want to prepare them now while you are there to be really good board members. And we have some suggestions. We're going to do this call the way we have some of the others. We're going to have a little discussion here at the beginning. The recording is going right now. So if there's anything that you want to keep off of the national airwaves, hold it until we turn the recording off. Because right now we're recording and it will be posted on our national website. But certainly, as soon as we turn it off, you can feel free to share with one another. I think we all have had the professional respect of not repeating what other people have said to other people. If there are a couple of you from the same state here, to be able to kind of handle that respectfully. So once we turn it off, we'll open it up to even more conversation. Let's see. Slideshow. It does this to me, and I don't know why, and I don't know how to make it change. I have had this problem before. End slideshow. And what happens is sometimes I have help from the guy from Houston, but guess what's going on in Houston right now? A hurricane. So I have to handle all of this myself, and hopefully I'll do it this time. It'll show up. Share screen. This is the right screen. Now you can see it, but it's not shared from the beginning. Okay, so we're going to share screen this way. And I won't be able, the way I've got it set up, evidently I can't see oh, there it is, the chat. There I can. So if you have any questions that you want to jump in the chat, put them in there. I cannot see your hands raised the way this is set up, so I will need your support in just jumping in. We're small enough, it shouldn't be an issue, so. So we're going to talk a little about recruiting your board, just a little, not much, but mostly about training them, giving them your expectations, helping them meet those expectations, and otherwise supporting your board of directors. So that's the topic today. And like I said, we'll talk for about 10 more minutes, maybe 15, and then we'll turn off the recording and talk even more freely. So this is part of ILNet. ILNet is the, it's a partnership between ILRU, April, the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, NICL, the National Council on Independent Living, and the University of Montana, which is actually my employer. I'm Paula McElwee. I'm a silver-haired, Scottish-complected, older woman. I have several disabilities, but one of them is a chronic pain condition. One of them is a neurological condition, which has been very interesting recently. So on our last call, those of you who were here may have noticed what's called a speech arrest. So there was a 45-second delay when I couldn't make words come out. It's a neurological thing. It had been 1.5 years since it had happened. So we're not talking frequently. It may or may not happen again. We'll see. Hadn't happened on camera before. My neurologist was thrilled to get the film. But anyway, that's one of my disabilities as well. This is a disability-led organization. So we've got all kinds of disabilities represented in the group, and those are a couple of mine. So we're going to talk about board recruitment, expectations for board members, training and training resources. I'll give you some specific ones, and we have a couple of new ones that are really good. If you weren't on the training earlier this month, you'll find that it's really excellent. And then other ideas that you have for building your board, making it a strong and effective board. So the first thing I want to talk about is board recruitment, because of course your board is only as good as the people on it. So and of course, you're looking for 51% or more people with significant disabilities, because we're disability run as centers and also as Silks, which some of you may also serve on the Statewide Independent Living Council. And I guess the first question is, who's looking for potential board members? Now, I worked with a center once that their policy was that the outgoing, they had term limits, which I do recommend, and I don't talk about that much today, but contact me separately if you want to talk about it further, because it really is important to do, and we can help you set it up so that nobody feels real threatened at the moment, but you still get a good practice in place. So contact me separately from this call, and we'll discuss that further. But so anyway, usually it's not good for a board member to find their own replacement. And that was what this center had as its policy. Well, then the result is what? A coworker, an employee, a neighbor, a friend of that board member gets appointed without the full board really having much say. So we don't recommend that that be your policy. Now, they can still be required to bring you an application for someone to replace them, but they cannot be an assumption that that person will replace them, because that puts you in a bad position as the ED, right? Then you're kind of stuck with whoever your board member wanted you to have. So gets a little hairy. Sometimes it's the board's policy that only board members bring you new board members or new potential board members. And that isn't always the most effective either, because as the ED, you're the one who's out and about and the most likely to meet people at conferences, on councils, as you're going about the business of the center. You're the most likely to meet other people with disabilities that are in the community that are potentially good leaders. or are already good leaders and just not associated yet with you. So, so you certainly want to be one of the key people making this happen. And you may also be aware of consumers that are potential good board members, which your board wouldn't necessarily come into contact with the consumers. So they may, but they may not. So you also want to look at all of those potential approaches and not just one of them. And in order to look at the broad range of approaches, I suggest an application process. And I'm curious if you all are using an application process, but use an application process, because then what the board member can do is hand someone an application or ask someone, would you like to apply to be on our board? We're going to have some openings coming up. I'd love to present your application to the board for consideration, something like that. That gives you a chance then to open up the process, but not make any promises. Oh, yes, you're going to be my replacement. Instead, it's, oh, yes, I have to take an application to the committee and go from there. So, so that's often a good way to do it. Often this is through a committee. So often you have a nominating committee, or sometimes the vice chair's job is to be the nominating committee. So often that's part of what's going on. But those nominations then can be reviewed by the committee, whether it's a committee of several board members, or the vice chair and the ED sometimes is that committee. And if you have an application process, you can also ask for, tell us about yourself. And then you can let the applicant know, well, we're looking for somebody specifically who has a financial background. And that's the only opening we have right now, but we are very interested in talking with you as soon as we have another opening. So we'll keep your application on file. I mean, if that's true. If you're not at all interested in talking to them, then you may just say we don't have an opening right now. So those would be some things. Anybody else have a different approach to board recruitment that you'd like to throw out to the group right now? Remember, I can't see your hands, so you just have to speak up.
This is LaDonna, and I'm from Rural Advocates for Independent Living, and we're a small center in Northeast Missouri, but we cover 10 counties. We found it very difficult to get board members. We've had some really bad experiences with huge boards, and Paula may or may not remember, we had husband and wife teams, we had father and daughter teams that were on, and it was a mess, and our center was a mess when I took over. But now what we do have the application process, but we have a couple of other requirements, and it could be why we're always looking and we're low on board members, but we ask them to attend at least one board meeting. And then also, we require them to do a couple of the ILRU board trainings so they understand what their responsibility is and what my responsibility is before they're even voted on or we actually accept their application. They have to provide me with that documentation, because otherwise sometimes we have found that you just get people that come in and they really don't understand what Centers for Independent Living do, which are totally different than your regular nonprofit organizations. So that's what we have done, but we do have an application process. I'm always looking for a better application though. always looking for something better.
And I don't know if I shared the one that I only have one that I've used, and it's the one from the center here in Fresno that I've shared with people, but there are other ones out there. I'm sure if people want to share them with me, I'll pass them on to your peers.
I would love to have some other examples.
Yeah. And LaDonna, you've just mentioned a couple of real dangers around letting board members find their own replacements, and that is they go to family members.
Yes.
And it's never, in fact, I suggest in a little bit, I'm going to talk to you about some things that you want to have in writing. It's the next slide here. But one of the things you want to have in writing is a conflict of interest policy, and I strongly suggest that you prohibit that in
Yes.
your conflict of interest policy if you haven't already. You probably have, but other people may not have.
Well, we do now. We didn't before, but we do now, but it didn't specifically state family members or, any, so it didn't really cover it. But then they didn't really, we had a previous school superintendent who was serving on our board who, as a part-time job after he retired, started selling school supplies where the board, unbeknownst to the board, the center was purchasing office supplies from him. And he was a previous school superintendent. He knew darn good and well what
He did.
what he should and shouldn't be doing. But that's just another example of, and we had board stipends at the time too. So not only did you have husband and wives who got very, very upset when we stopped the stipending, and one of them was a physician, and his comment to me was, well, that's the money that we donate to St. Jude's every year. I'm like, oh my goodness, you have
Well,
no
why don't you just
idea.
let us keep it and we'll call it a donation to our center?
Exactly. But that's what you
Yeah.
run into, as you said, when you don't have the right people and they don't know what their position is, because the previous director thought she ran the board. And in real actuality, it should have been the other way around. So
Yeah. And we see this when things go south, they just get worse and worse and worse. And so we see it, it seems a little innocent. Oh, we need another board member and my wife is really good at XYZ. And so why don't you recruit her? And then the next thing you know, you've got a voting block and they're voting themselves a stipend, So you go on from there. But yeah, somehow stating in your documents, it can be in your, I suggest in your conflict of interest policy, but it can be somewhere else, that you do not have family members serving on the board is important. And I just had a situation where, again, like you said, somebody who should have known better said, oh, I think my son would be really, really good. Would that be okay for me to suggest him? And I said, well, if you're resigning from the board, are you resigning from the board? You could suggest him that he apply. She didn't like that. So anyway, yeah.
Can I,
yeah.
Paula,
ahead.
can I ask a question? I
Of course.
actually just, one of my staff, her father is hearing impaired, and he's a big leader in Rhode Island, and I thought he really embodied our mission. So I recruited him, but what we do is anything pertaining to the staff, he's excused, so he doesn't have any information when it comes to like payroll and stuff like that. So
Well, even
what are
Ben
your
Metz,
thoughts?
who goes to the conference,
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of things that a board member can attempt to influence without even realizing they're doing it. I mean, sometimes in the very best of, I'm an advocate for the staff. I know what they need. I know what they want, and I'm going to bring this to you because I'm an advocate for the staff. So you really do have to take a look at this as a part of your
Okay.
code of ethics. Yeah.
So do you think, we just recruited him, so I didn't think that would be a conflict of interest, just because I thought he would be an amazing board member to the agency.
Totally
And
your call, I mean, certainly it's a board member's call. I would never recommend a staff member's family member be on the board. It's
Okay.
never, here's the deal. It's never a problem till it's a problem.
that's exactly
Okay.
right. And we had the worst of all worst scenarios. But Paula, if you could share that conflict of interest policy, just so I can compare it to mine. But we had the same situation in reverse. We had a staff member who they recruited her son, who had a TBI, and as a board member. And oh, they thought he would be a great board member. He had a TBI, he was great representation of someone with a disability, but he couldn't understand financials. He couldn't read the minutes. He couldn't, he just went through the motions, and that's not good either.
Well, now that's a good point that I didn't really address here, and we may want to take that up as a separate topic at some point, but tokenism is not the purpose of having a 51% or more, board members with disabilities. And if someone's on the board to be a token, that's problematic. But if they're on the board, have an intellectual disability, and they have a mentor, another board member who might sit next to them and assist them, or somebody who'd sit down with them before the board meeting and go over anything that they have questions about. There are accommodations, reasonable accommodations that can be made, right? So you have to sort. And Muriel, I'm not saying you need to get rid of this guy, right? But I'm saying, look at it, consider it, put it in your policies for the future. When he rotates off, don't bring another family member back on. Right? Because you may have great value from him, but he probably also is representative of a community, and he knows other people in that community that might be good on the board. So
I know, but now I'm like rethinking it, because I was just gonna introduce him to my board actually next week. And I just thought he would be a great board member and he'd bring a lot to OSO. But now after you told me this, the only thing is, like I stated before, that I thought he would be excused when it had to do with anything that had to do with staff. But I don't know, now I'm
well, and that's
rethinking
what
it.
a conflict of interest policy actually says, is that
Yeah.
the person won't be involved in making a decision where they have a conflict.
Okay,
So that's usually what it says. It doesn't say they can't serve at all, but I like to suggest that you examine that for the future. Don't feel like you have to dismantle a current board or throw out a new board member, but consider for the future how you want to do this, because it isn't ever a problem till it's a problem. And I bet there are other people here who've also seen some issues along this line.
well, I'd like to stop it before it starts. So since, it was an introduction, I'd rather, send an email before, we start.
Well, sort that out, because you know whether or not that's going to impact your reputation in the community. You don't want to do something that's going to cause a negative reputation as a result, right?
Yeah, that's
Denise
true.
suggested make him a non-voting member, like an ad hoc member who would advise you but not make voting decisions. That's an option. Sometimes
Okay.
you want people that can serve on a committee. So he may have an area of expertise and might serve really well on a committee, but not need to be on the full board. That's also an option.
Okay,
But really look at all of those ideas. Let's get through these slides and then we'll go back to the open conversation again. I really suggest that you have things in writing. You'll hear me say sometimes to clarify and agree. And that's actually something I got from a mentor a long time ago. From Wisconsin, actually. But my mentor from Wisconsin, that was what he always said, was you need to clarify and agree. And usually that means in writing. So have a written description of what's required of each board member. That can be in the bylaws or in a policy or in a job description, although it's not a job, but the same is true for officers, the responsibilities of officers and the responsibilities of committees. If you use committees, make sure that people know what they're supposed to do, that you wrote it down, and then you cover it with them. Now, you also may need policies and procedures related to this, including that code of ethics that we talked about. Making sure that that's in policy and procedure, how you handle what the board does and doesn't approve for financially, and what that looks like would probably be in policy and procedure, what the finance committee does, how the audit's handled, all those kinds of things are going to be in policies and procedures. so that the expectations you have for individual members or for the board as a whole, either one, are written down and clarified and agreed upon by the people involved. Now, also, do you have an orientation for new members? Or a pre-orientation, LaDonna, as you said, a pre-membership orientation. The only, I'll show you in a second some references. The only ones that we have where people can actually get a proof that they attended our training is what we call rapid courses. So if you go to our website and there's a training thing and you drop it down at the bottom of the menu, it says rapid courses. And those will actually give you, if you ask for it, a certificate that you've completed the course. Otherwise, somebody's just going to have to tell you they completed it, and you'll have to take their word for it, which shouldn't be a bad thing to do. They're a board member. You're going to hope you can trust them that much, right? But new board member orientation usually includes a copy of the bylaws, copy of your policies and procedures, a packet from one of your board meetings, a set of minutes from one or more of your recent board meetings so they kind of can come up to speed. And I often suggest a mentor on the board, another member on the board that they can, like I said, sit next to and have somebody say, oh, here's where you find that information, or, you know, here's who that is, and introduce the person as people come in. And, or if you're on a Zoom call, you know, be the person to introduce that new board member, another board member instead of the ED. That's always nice. But also, do you have some kind of an annual training or review of important information for the full board would be part of that question, right? So you want to make sure you have that in place. Here are some training resources. We just had a webinar. If any of you attended it and want to put in the chat how wonderful you thought it was great. It included insights from 2 SIL board members. They were presenters with me. And it was really, I thought, well done. So you can take a look at that. We have a board manual hot off the press, and there's the link to that there. And I suggest you give that to your board members so that they can kind of take a look at it. It is the kind of thing you could cover with a new member or cover chapters at board meetings so that you can provide training to your board. There's a specific page from the manual about engaging and supporting the board of directors that I liked, so I included the link to that page specifically. And then the bottom one is the one I told you about, that you can actually get a certificate that you've completed it. It's a self-directed course that people can attend, and there are 2 parts of it for the board members. One's general and one's on financial management specifically. And just a few ideas on support before we go to our open discussion, unrecorded discussion. And that is, first of all, be sure you always tell your board what's going on, whether it's good or bad, and sure before it hits the news, but even before it hits the grapevine. Some of you have very tight-knit communities, and if something's going on that the board needs to know, make sure you're the one that tells them. You are the board chair, maybe, but invite the board members to every single community event you have. Even if they never have attended a community event, they still want to know what's going on and what you're doing in the community. So don't let them be stopped on the street by somebody who says, oh, I saw that your center has a booth down here at the farmer's market. That's really cool. And they don't want to hear it from their neighbor. They want to hear it from you. Make sure that they know about any of your social media pages and that they've liked it and follow it. They may or may not notice anything. They may or may not pay attention to the things that you do. But if you're posting on social media, don't let your board members, again, be surprised about something. Make sure that they know how to sign up so that they can know what's going on. And then also, if they like and share your posts, that's going to give you a broader community impact because they have connections to the community, right? And yeah, the PowerPoint for this presentation is we'll post a link in a minute, but it's going to be posted when we're done with the meeting here. So And then be sure that an actual meeting, they have enough information to make decisions. I suggest that they get a piece of paper for every single, for every single item that they have to make a decision on. And I always suggest that your agenda include next to the item, what action it needs to be taken, if any. So if you've got an item minutes, then the action to be taken is a motion to approve, right? But if you've got an item like report from the nickel conference, then the action to be taken is none, or for information only, or something like that. So that when they're looking at an agenda, they don't have to worry about whether to make a motion or not. It's right there. It's so easy if it's right there. And if they know what their choices were, it helps them make a decision. So if I'm asking somebody for a choice, I used to, when I had a board of my own, I used to just outline on a brief, here's the issue. Here are the choices we considered, ABC, and here's our recommendation. And then they can read all that ahead of the meeting, and then somebody can say, I move that we do the recommendation, and somebody else seconds it. And then you have your discussion about all those items, but it goes much more quickly. A lot of times your board wants short meetings. We'll help them do that and still make meaningful decisions, right? So this is going to be helpful if you have this kind of information. Now we're going to talk about, as soon as we shut this off, what else you can do for your boards, what clarification you need, or more explanation about any of this. My contact information is here. If you're asking for anything in the chat, I cannot promise you I will remember that. So please email me and ask there, because even if you ask out loud, I'm not going to guarantee I'll remember. And we are going to ask at the end of the call that you do an evaluation. There's also a link in the chat that Joey's put there. Joey, how are you doing in the hurricane? Joey's in Houston.
Barely hanging in there, but glad to be able to join y'all.
Well, glad you could. So anyway, that's the end of that part. And let's go ahead and shut off the recording.